Hi, Gary Stearman. Time for another edition of Prophecy in the News, and you're going to be glad you watched today because we are going to be discussing this book, Petrus Romanus. It has literally taken the publishing world by storm. We have the co-authors with us today. Well, today I'd like to welcome author, lecturer, all-around good fellow and gentleman, Tom Horn. Welcome to Prophecy in the News. You've been here before. Always good having you here.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. Great to be with you.
And on my left, we have Chris Putnam, who is I'm given to understand, a natural-born researcher. You love to dig for facts. And in this book, Petrus Romanus, Tom and Chris have, in fact, dug out things that have been hidden literally for centuries. You're going to hear about them today. You're going to hear about what I believe was divine guidance that put this book together. And Tom, we've talked about this. Perhaps the biggest story about Petrus Romanus is not just the timeliness of it, but the way it came together in the first place.
Absolutely right. And I mean, we can't go into all of the details, but Gary, it is not hype for me to say that in my lifetime, and keep in mind, I pastored 25 years, 30-some years in ministry, and not one thing in my lifetime has even come close to being as important as this research. The way it came together, the stuff that fell in our lap, and I got to tell you that Chris Putnam, who's with us here today, and I'm thankful because he's the theologian and the apologist that keeps me straight. There were more than one incident during this book in which we literally stopped, questioned whether we even should write it or not.
Wow.
Because the material was both not only important, but it literally made the hair stand up on the back of our neck.
In other words, there was some divine guidance involved here. And by the way, that's when the best things happen in Christian publishing. Over the years, there have been a number of Christian authors who have had this testimony, that they felt the guiding hand of the Lord as they put their work together. And I think you did too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, even the way Chris and I came together is another story we won't take time to tell, but it was unexpected. Emails from him to me at the same day that I had been talking to others, wondering why nobody had written a book on the prophecy of the popes. I mean, here you have a medieval prophecy, right? 900 years old. It's one of the most important Catholic documents, probably. It was concealed inside, the dark corridors of the Vatican for 500 years, was only brought to light in 1595. But now there seems to be something preternatural that is occurring. There's something strange, something supernatural, because not only did the author of the prophecy of the popes look forward to what appears to be the year 2012, we started discovering that way beyond the Maya, there were preachers, experts, theologians, and occult societies, prophets, looking for hundreds of years and in some cases thousands of years into the future, seeing an event horizon in which the false prophet of end times biblical fame would appear just before the coming of the Antichrist, and looking to the year 2012.
Wow. And of course, who hasn't heard about the 2012 prophecies? But this is nothing to do with the Mayan calendar, folks. This is something entirely above and beyond that, I believe. And that brings me to Chris. And Chris, welcome to Prophecy in the News.
Hi, Gary. It's an honor to be here.
Chris Putnam is I think, a born researcher, and I've talked with him enough to know that. There are some people who just love to pursue the little dark corners of literature. And you were actually brought into this because of the prophecy of the popes and a lost book. Tell us about the lost book.
Oh, that's correct. When I started researching this prophecy, I began to read other books that had been written about it, and there was a pretty popular one that was written around the year 2000 called The Last Pope by John Hogue. And I read his book, and I was trying to find out the true origins of the prophecy, because there's some controversy about if it was really from Malachi, if it was really from 1139, and some scholars will say that it's a forgery written around in the 16th century. And But John Hogue mentioned an Italian book that had burned up in a monastery, and perhaps it had the last real information about the origins of the Malachi prophecy. So I started looking around for the title of that book, and lo and behold, if I didn't find the book that was supposed to be lost to history, and I was able to locate a library that had it and got some scans of it sent to me. So that was the beginning of just some really amazing discoveries, that things were just falling into our laps as we researched this prophecy.
Now, the prophecy of the popes is what? For people who are not familiar with it, give us a thumbnail of what that prophecy says.
Well, certainly. As the legend goes, an Irish saint named Saint Malachi was summoned to Rome to visit with the Pope, and while he was there, he received a vision of 112 popes from the future, the next pope from then on, to the end of time. And so in this vision, he has these Latin phrases, these nebulous little phrases, and some of them are kind of vague, and some of them are pretty specific. But each phrase denotes something about the pontificate or the reign of the particular pope in which it denotes. So you have ones like the Roman cross, or flower from flowers, or some of them are more specific. And for instance, religion depopulated. That was the one that really caught my attention, because here we have one that's in recent history, and it was for Benedict XV, which was 1914 to 1922. Now, when I'm looking at this prophecy, I was skeptical at first, and I didn't know whether I should accept this as a real prophecy. It's not a biblical prophecy. It's some kind of mystical Catholic thing. Why should I believe it, right? Well, Benedict XV, 1914 to 1922, religion depopulated. This was the time of World War I, where the Catholic Church lost a lot of members just from casualties in the war. But to add insult to injury, it's the time of the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, where they estimate like up to 200 million of the Orthodox Church left the fold to join communism. And then you have Stalin and Lenin persecuting and throwing people in the gulags. I mean, I think Stalin alone is responsible for 42 million deaths. So you have the greatest mega murderer in history right at the time that this prophecy said religion would be depopulated. And that's the kind of evidence that's so compelling that I had to take this thing somewhat seriously and look into it further.
So you began to see little clues here and there, and your eyes got wider and wider, and you pursued this thing. You mentioned something about the coats of arms, or the heraldry of the papacy. That, to me, is fascinating, and you've got that covered in Petrus Romanus. Tell us about that.
Well, certainly. A lot of those Latin phrases seem to say something about the coat of arms, and they call it heraldry. And you would think that might be something that would be easily to manipulate. And
Sure.
My first thought was, well, maybe the Pope just picks his coat of arms to match the prophecy, in a way to get him elected Pope. And so I looked into that, using a critical methodology, and I've discovered that heraldry is an art and science in the Roman Catholic Church, and they actually have a lot of rules about how they go about it. When you become a cardinal, you are required to pick your coat of arms if you haven't already had one. A lot of them already have it from their family. But so it's a requirement, and when you become a cardinal, you're talking usually a period of between 30 and 40 years between the time someone is a cardinal and then gets elected Pope.
So let me stop you right there. Just because you get to be a cardinal certainly does not guarantee the papacy. There are many, many steps between becoming a cardinal and becoming a pope, and yet that fixed coat of arms occurs when you become a cardinal. Now, that's amazing, because this introduces what could be chance into the situation. It's a very chancy thing that a particular coat of arms will become pope, and yet the prophecy of the popes seems to link to those coats of arms.
It seems to accurately describe many of the Pope's coat of arms way ahead of time.
Wow. And folks, you can read all about this in Petrus Romanus. I guarantee you an amazing, amazing journey when you get into this book. There are so many signs today. People are talking about times and dates and places, and they're talking about calendars, and they're talking about solar and lunar eclipses and wars and rumors of wars and Middle East upheavals. And right in the middle, of the whole thing, you have Petrus Romanus. Tom, this is amazing, and the book is timely. I can't overemphasize that word, timely.
Yeah, in fact, that's part of what compelled us to write the book, because nobody else had written it. I mean, we were actually kind of amazed by the fact that just for historical reasons alone, you have a medieval prophecy 900 years old, and the very next pope, following Pope Benedict XVI, is the last one on this list. And the author of the prophecy tells us that two things will happen. One, he will be a pope, or an anti-pope, that will be under the control of Satan. He'll actually be the pope that will take the role of the false prophet, who will help give rise to the Antichrist. A lot of Catholics, by the way, don't know that it is a very common eschatology in their history that many of their leaders, many of their prophets, their famous apparitions, La Salette, Fatima, some of the most celebrated men that were members of the church, Cardinal Henry Manning, wrote and detailed how at the end of time, Rome would become apostate and would become the seat of the Antichrist. This was actually a common thought among intellectuals in Romanism, in Roman Catholicism. But taking the timing of this prophecy and looking at all of the other signatures around it, something, again, is very strange about the year 2012. One thing I'd want to add, Gary, first of all, we are not date setters, and I know you're not a date setter. Prophecy in the News is not a date setter. So we're not setting dates. We're looking at why were so many other people pointing to the year 2012. And then we're looking at some things that may be beyond coincidence, in that around the world today, you could take Matthew 24, and I dare anybody to take any part of Matthew 24, whether it's talking about signs in nature, earthquakes, what's happening in the Middle East right now that looks like, what do we got, something like 19 countries with the United States right now that are staging major war games in the Middle East, but they've excluded Israel. I mean, there's prophetic signatures all over the world, and right in the middle of it, you have what looks to be the final prophecy from a Catholic mystic who pointed to the coming of the false prophet, and it looks to be playing out in the year 2012. You look at Rome right now, even the current Pope Benedict XVI has argued as a theologian that it would be okay for him to step down. He's getting feeble. They're wheeling him around on a cart everywhere he's going. The Vatican's own official voice piece, the El Osservatore Romano, their newspaper, had a feature article in it recently saying that the electors, the conclave, the College of Cardinals, are preparing for the conclave that is going to elect his successor, that they're already preparing for that now. So you see something that certainly could be fulfilled, and this imminently, which could be a major fulfillment of Bible prophecy. Can I say one final thing? Sure. And that is this. Not only are we not date setters, we also don't put on a par with the Bible any extra biblical prophecies. But we do recognize that it's good evangelical theology to accept that God sometimes chooses sources through which revelation comes that would not fit easy into our denominational boxes. For instance, when he chose Nebuchadnezzar to give him one of the most central prophecies, you got this evil, narcissistic, pagan king. And then he even requires Daniel to interpret that fantastic revelation that is central to much of dispensational thinking today. You have Balaam, a sorcerer, who's hired by Balak, the Moabite king, to prophesy evil against Israel. And yet we know that his prophecy, I shall see a star, but not now, a scepter shall rise out of Judah, that this is probably the prophecy in Numbers that caused the Magi in the New Testament to follow the star and travel to the birth of the king, and this from a sorcerer. So sometimes God, I wish God would follow my rule book, but he doesn't always. And we were left wondering if what's transpiring rapidly around this book, and there's going to be a lot we can't get into just on this show, but there are things in this book people are never going to read anywhere else. We should talk about the Codex from a French writer by the name of René Thibault, Jesuit.
A Jesuit. René Thibault. Remember that name. I'm going to talk about how you can get the book, and then we'll come back and we'll discuss that, because that is fascinating. The book is Petrus Romanus. You can see over 500 pages, and it's not puffed up. There are 500 pages of real information here that you can't get anywhere else. And we're not promising that you're going to be able to read this in one evening. But what we are promising is that you will go on the adventure of your life. Petrus Romanus, $19.95 plus shipping and handling. If you call 1-800-475-1111. And by the way, I've got something here that comes absolutely free with this book. It is a DVD-ROM that has, and Tom helped me with this, it has 120 titles, roughly, on a disc that you can put into your computer and read the source materials that were used to put this book together.
Yeah, because this book actually, and again, this is not hype, it's not an overstatement, it's the most fantastic research I've ever been involved in. And we knew that there are parts of this book that is going to so blow people away that they're going to want to check our records to make sure we didn't make all this stuff up. So we decided to produce this data DVD. It's got over 20,000 pages of research material, whole collections of libraries. It's got over 8 hours of radio shows. It's got movies. I mean, it's the DVD alone, by the way, would be worth hundreds of dollars for you to go out and purchase the Kindle books, all of the material that is on this. But we also include on there the Lost book that John Hogue had referred to and that Chris Putnam was talking about a moment ago. The French book we will talk about, the Codex, that came from a Jesuit and what it had to say, which was amazing. It's on there in French and in English. So it's just a powerful and very large collection, over 20,000 pages of material.
And the book and the DVD, it's a DVD-ROM or a data DVD that plays in your computer at $19.95. Now, we would like to offer you with this in a package, what we're calling the Petrus Romanus package for $42.95. This plus a year's subscription to Prophecy in the News. I'm holding up here the June 2012 issue, which has as a cover story, Sounds Out of Heaven. You know, people have been hearing strange sounds all over this world, emanating from the heavens. What does this mean? Does the, does the Bible say anything about it? Well, I've written what I think is a pretty good biblical exposition that might put those sounds in context. This is the June 2012 issue of Prophecy in the News. But let me repeat, the book, the DVD-ROM, and the year's subscription to Prophecy in the News can be yours for $42.95, which is considerably less than if you ordered them separately. Just call 1-800-475-1111, $42.95 plus shipping and handling. Ask for the Petrus Romanus package. And now let's get down to cases. Let's talk about Rene Thibault. And Tom, I'm just going to let you and Chris sort of have a discussion here about Rene Thibault and his book. Let's start with Chris. How did you come across this book, and what's the basic thesis?
Well, Gary, I was, researching the prophecy, and there was a lot of Catholic scholars who were critical of it, that thought it might have been a forgery or some kind of a propaganda effort to get a particular papal candidate elected in the 16th century. But then I was also looking for sources that believed in the prophecy. And one modern Catholic scholar, his name's John Lupia, he's actually the editor of Roman Catholic News. He wrote 2 articles in support of the authenticity and the reliability of the prophecy. And he wholeheartedly believes it's a real prophecy. And one thing that he did was he listed a whole list of sources of bibliography, and I referred to his sources, and I found this book by a Belgian Jesuit academic named Rene Thibault. Now, Rene Thibault was a Jesuit. He taught at the university over there in Belgium, and he wrote a book called The Mysterious Prophecy of the Popes. Now, he also believed the prophecy. But he did detect that there was some tampering that went on with it, and he dated the authentic portion of the prophecy from 1572 forward. And so what he did in 1951, this is when this book was published. I had a copy of it that I had dug up from a university basement. In 1951, he extrapolated the average papal reign length as 11 years. So what he did is he added up all the popes, all the time from 1572 until his time in 1950, and divided that, and he got 11 years. Okay, so there were 40 popes after 1572 to the end of the list. And at the end of the list, it predicts the destruction of Rome and the judgment of God. So with 40 popes left in 11 years, that's 440 years. And if you add that to 1572, which is starting date, you land squarely in 2012. Now, this just blew me away.
Wow.
I mean, all the hype that we have in the media about the year 2012, and here I discover a book written in 1951, way before the Mayan calendar was popular, way before 2012 is on anybody's radar. This Jesuit predicted the final pope and the judgment of Rome from 6 different calculations. 2012. There you go.
Tom, this is mind-boggling.
Yeah, it absolutely is, and there's so much more. I mean, to me, I wanted to give credit where credit is due because Chris Putnam was the one that found this document. And the only reason why the book, this book by Rene Thibault had fallen into obscurity is because he published it in 1951, and he died literally a few months later. So the book just immediately went out of print. He died in 1952 in Egenhoven, and became lost to the world. But there's so much about what he found in the prophecy of the popes that makes it even more extraordinary, meaning that the 11-year, for instance, calculation of the average pope from 1572 forward to his day, 1950, would not have needed to remain true. In fact, mathematically, statistically, it shouldn't have remained true. His prediction should have fallen apart, falling.
You know what impressed me, if I can interrupt here, is the fact that some papal reigns are extremely short. Others are extremely long. And yet they all balance out to that 11-year average.
They did, from his day forward until the current year. In fact, part of that was because, like Pope John Paul I only lived as Pope 33 days and then died. There's conspiracy around that. Was he poisoned? Was it the Freemasons? Yeah. But the bottom line was, it literally required him to die after 33 days in order to keep this 11-year average reign of popes, leading all the way up to Pope Benedict XVI. And if Benedict XVI is replaced in 2012, he too would have fit into that model. But that's only the first thing. Chris could tell you about the fact that Thibault also believed that the document was of Irish origin, which would of course fit with the idea that Malachi had written it. And the Irish loved doing anagrams. They loved hiding things in plain sight inside of words. Well, some of the stuff that he found in here, like the pope that became one of the popes known as Pius, it not only predicted what it was his heraldry would match, but hidden in the language is Pius Pius. So twice, like Mayday Mayday, he wanted us to be aware that hidden in that language was the actual name that this pope would take.
Well, what can I say except, folks, you've heard maybe this much of what this book is about, and already you've got to be incredibly. As you're talking, I'm just sitting here and thinking, this is a 500-page book, and we've covered what, 25 pages?
Well, 25 pages maybe. The bottom line is it's over 500 pages. Yeah. There's 750 authoritative endnotes, images, graphs, because again, what fell into our lap is amazing that nobody else had found this, amazing that nobody else had wrote it. Oh, and if we didn't say so before, on the disc that you're giving away with this book is the codex written by Rene Thibault. His book in its entirety is in there in French. It's also in there in a rough English translation, so people will again be able to verify for themselves that we didn't make this up.
Here's the book and the data DVD, which basically is way worth the price of the book. 1995, Petrus Romanus. The subtitle, The Final Pope is Here. That's a fairly brazen statement to make if you're not kind of sure of yourself. And I think, Tom, and I think, Chris, you're pretty sure something is afoot, right?
Well, that's correct. I mean, it's really not even controversial to say the final pope is here, because no matter what happens, this prophecy listed 112 popes, and we're at number 111 right now. So either way, it's the final pope on that prophecy.
$19.95 plus shipping and handling for Petrus Romanus. Call 1-800-475-1111. If you would like a year's subscription of our magazine, this is the June 2012 edition with my lead article in it on strange sounds being heard around the world from the heavens. We will add a year's subscription of Prophecy in the News to the Petrus Romanus package, $42.95 plus shipping and handling. Call 1-800-475-1111. Ask for the book for $19.95. The Petrus Romanus package, only $42.95 plus shipping and handling. And whichever order you choose, you're going to get lots of great, up-to-date, right now information. Gentlemen, we have just a little over 2 minutes. Where do you want to go?
Well, one thing I would want to say is that when a person reads this book, they're going to come to a conclusion that Rene Thibault did. After studying this, and keep in mind he was a Jesuit, he was devoted to Catholicism, he was an academic, he was a code breaker, he was an anagram solver. He was a brilliant individual, and they'll see that in the book as he approaches this from solar activity. He approaches it from all these various improbable, including mathematical, highly complex mathematical formulae to show from all these various improbable situations that it pointed exclusively to the year 2012 for the final pope, and it looks very much like his calculations may in fact be accurate. And so you're going to leave this believing what he did. Something unusual is going on with this prophecy. Then we raise the question, was it divinely inspired? Was it demonically inspired? Or there's a third option. Have the cardinals been electing popes for one reason or another that they believe would match up somehow with this prophecy?
Wow. Well, Chris, in about a minute or less, what struck you, I think, the strongest? I'd just like to know your impression as you were doing all this, putting the book together. What really struck you?
Well, Gary, the thing that you can't get away from is the ending of the prophecy. And I'll just read it really quickly here. In the extreme persecution of the Holy Roman Church, they will set Peter the Roman, who will nourish the sheep in many tribulations. When they are finished, the city of 7 hills will be destroyed, and the dreadful judge will judge his people, the end. Now that's the last prophecy, and that's the prophecy for the very next pope. And the thing that we couldn't escape is how that seems to coincide with biblical prophecy. The book of Revelation talks about the city of 7 hills, the 7 mountains or 7 hills. It talks about the false prophet having horns like a lamb, which makes you believe that perhaps he's seen as a Christian leader. So that coincidence with biblical prophecy made us take this prophecy seriously.
Wow. Chris, thanks for being here. Tom, it's been wonderful. We're going to continue this conversation, by the way, for our next program, Prophecy in the News. Gary Stearman, we're right in that time, so keep looking up, everybody.
Prophecy in the News is a viewer-supported ministry sponsored by our many friends across America and in your area. For your gift of $10, you can receive a special edition of our current program on an audio CD, or for a gift of $20, we'll send you our programs on DVD videos. For either order, call the 800 number on your screen right now.